It all starts with a vibe, doesn't it? A feeling in the air. Before grime, before drill, before any of the sounds that define the UK today, there was a spark. That spark was London Posse. They weren't just a group, they were a movement. They were the ones who kicked down the door and showed us what was possible. They were the voice of a generation that was finding its footing, a generation with roots in the Caribbean, but a life lived on the streets of London. They told our stories in our own voice, with our own slang. They were the foundation, the blueprint for everything that came after. Without them, the UK music scene would look very, very different. The group was made up of 4 key members, each one bringing something unique to the table. You had Rodney P, the man who would become the godfather of British hip-hop. His flow was like nothing else at the time, calm but heavy, full of wisdom and street smarts. Then there was Bionic, a lyrical powerhouse with a sharp, energetic delivery that could cut through any beat. Cypho, the human beatbox, brought the rhythm, creating incredible sounds with just his mouth, a true master of his craft. And DJ Business was the man on the decks, the one who found the breaks and stitched the whole sound together. Together, they were more than just a crew, they were a force of nature. Their story begins in Brixton, South London. This wasn't just a place on a map, it was the heart of Black British culture. The energy of the markets, the smell of jerk chicken in the air, the booming bass from sound systems on a Saturday night. This was the world that shaped them. They came up in a time when being black and British meant you had to fight for your space, for your identity. Hip-hop was coming over from America, but it didn't quite tell our story. London Posse were the ones who took that American art form and gave it a British passport, a London accent, and a Jamaican soul. They stood for something real. They weren't trying to copy anyone. They were unapologetically themselves. They talked about life as they saw it, the good and the bad. They talked about the struggle, the hustle, the politics of the street. They made it cool to sound British, to use our own slang, words like brethren and nuff. Before them, many UK rappers tried to sound American. London Posse broke that mold. They showed us that our own voices were powerful, that our own stories were important. They were pioneers, true originals, and they laid the groundwork for every UK MC who picked up a mic after them. Every great crew has an origin story, a moment where the right people find each other at the right time. For London Posse, that place was Brixton, and the time was the mid-1980s. This was a time of creative explosion. Hip-hop culture was bubbling up from the streets, and sound systems were a way of life. Rodney P and Bionic were already making names for themselves in this world. They were part of a sound system crew called Mixmaster, soaking up the vibes of reggae, dancehall and early hip-hop. They were young, hungry and full of lyrics, battling other MCs and honing their skills night after night. It wasn't a formal audition or a record label meeting that brought them together. It was the streets. It was a shared love for the music and the culture. Rodney P and Bionic connected through the sound system scene, their styles complementing each other perfectly. Rodney's laid-back, thoughtful flow was the perfect counterpoint to Bionic's high-energy, rapid-fire delivery. They were like two sides of the same coin. They started working together, writing rhymes, and realizing they had something special. They weren't just two MCs. They were a partnership, a lyrical duo that could go back-to-back and create magic. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place when they linked up with Cypho, the human beatbox, and DJ Business. This wasn't just about adding members, it was about building a complete unit. Cypho was a phenomenon, a one-man rhythm section who could create complex beats and sound effects with his voice. He was the live, raw energy of the group. DJ Business was the musical architect, the crate digger with an ear for the perfect sample. He understood the art of the breakbeat, the backbone of hip-hop. With these 4 elements combined, 2 distinct MCs, a human beatbox, and a master DJ, London Posse was born. They started performing at local jams, community centres and house parties. Their energy was infectious. People had never seen anything like it before. Here was a group that looked and sounded like them. They were representing South London with pride. They weren't just performing songs. They were creating an experience. The raw talent was undeniable. Word started to spread beyond Brixton, through word of mouth and dodgy cassette tape recordings of their live shows. A new chapter in British music was beginning, written by 4 young men who had found their voice and were ready to share it with the world. What made London Posse so different? It was the sound. It was a sound that you couldn't have heard anywhere else in the world. It was the sound of London itself, a melting pot of cultures, rhythms, and languages. They took the hard-hitting boom-bap beats of New York hip-hop, the kind of stuff they were hearing from legends like Rakim and Big Daddy Kane, and they fused it with something else. They injected it with the soul of the Caribbean, the bass lines of reggae, the chat of a dance hall MC. It was a revolutionary mix, a sound that spoke to a generation of Black Britons who lived between 2 worlds. This wasn't just a musical choice, it was a statement of identity. They were proudly claiming all parts of their heritage. You could hear it in the slang they used, a mix of London street talk and Jamaican patois. Words like wagwan and scene sat comfortably next to London slang. It felt natural, it felt real. It was the language spoken on the buses, in the playgrounds, and at the family parties. By putting it on record, they validated that experience. They told a generation of kids that the way they spoke, the way they lived, was something to be proud of, something worthy of being turned into art. Rodney P's flow was a perfect example of this fusion. He had the confidence and the swagger of an American MC, but his rhythm and his cadence were pure reggae. He would ride the beat with a relaxed, almost conversational style, but his words carried weight. He could be telling a story about life on the block, or he could be dropping political commentary, but it always had that dancehall flavour. Bionic, on the other hand, brought a more aggressive, fast-paced energy, but even his flow was peppered with the sounds and rhythms he grew up hearing from Jamaican DJs. It was a new style of rapping, a British style. This unique blend of sounds set them apart from everyone else. At the time, the UK hip-hop scene was still trying to find its voice. Many artists were either directly copying American styles or making music that felt a bit novelty. London Posse came with something that was authentic and powerful. Their music had the grit of the city streets and the warmth of the Caribbean sun. It was music you could nod your head to, but it was also music that made you think. They created a sonic identity for British hip-hop, a foundation that countless artists would build upon for decades to come. Every artist has that one track that changes everything. For London Posse, that track was Money Mad. Released in 1990, this wasn't just a song, it was a statement of intent. It dropped like a bomb on the UK music scene. The beat, produced by the legendary Tim Westwood, was hard and gritty. But it was the lyrics that really hit home. Rodney P and Bionic painted a vivid picture of the hustle, the desire for a better life, and the pressures of a society obsessed with wealth. It was a story that everyone on the street could relate to, told with an honesty and a style that was completely fresh. The song got major support. Westwood championed it on his influential Capital FM radio show, giving the group a platform they could only have dreamed of. Hearing Money Mad on the radio was a massive moment for the culture. It was a British rap song, with British accents and British slang, being played on a major station. It proved that our music had a place, that our stories mattered. The track became an anthem, not just in London, but across the country. It was the sound of the underground breaking through to the mainstream, and London Posse were leading the charge. Their rise wasn't just about one song, though. It was their live shows that cemented their reputation. A London Posse show was an event. It was raw, energetic, and unpredictable. With Cypho providing the live beats and Business cutting up records, they had a stage presence that was unmatched. Rodney P and Bionic would trade verses, their chemistry undeniable. They connected with the crowd on a deep level because they were part of that crowd. They weren't distant stars. They were boys from the ends who had made it, and they brought that energy with them every time they touched the stage. This period saw them share stages with some of the biggest names in hip-hop. They toured with international stars like Big Daddy Kane and Public Enemy. Holding their own alongside these American giants was a huge deal. It showed the world that the UK had talent, that we had our own unique flavour of hip-hop that could stand on its own 2 feet. They were ambassadors for a scene that was still in its infancy. They were kicking down doors not just for themselves, but for every UK artist who would come after them. Their rise was a victory for the entire culture. After the success of Money Mad, the anticipation for a full album was, well, absolutely huge. In 1990, London Posse delivered their masterpiece Gangster Chronicle. This wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a fully formed artistic statement. The album was a deep dive into the realities of life in inner-city London. It was a chronicle, just as the title said, a document of their lives and the lives of the people around them. It covered everything from police harassment and social inequality to the everyday hustle and the search for identity. It was raw, it was honest, and it was unapologetically British. The production on the album was really next level. It built on the foundation they had laid with their early singles, blending hard hip-hop beats with deep reggae bass lines and clever samples. Tracks like How's Life in London became anthems for a generation. The song was a powerful piece of social commentary, asking a simple question but exploring the complex, often difficult answers. It spoke of the struggle, but also the resilience and the pride of the people. It was a love letter to their city, but a letter that didn't shy away from the harsh realities of living there. Lyrically, Gangster Chronicle was a tour de force. Rodney P and Bionic were at the peak of their powers. Their storytelling was vivid and cinematic. You could, close your eyes and see the scenes they were describing. They had a unique ability to be both specific to their London experience and universal in their themes. Songs like Original London Style were declarations of pride in their culture and their sound. They were planting a flag, letting the world know that London had its own voice in the global hip-hop conversation. The album was a lesson in authenticity. Decades later, Gangster Chronicle is rightly seen as one of the most important albums in British music history. It's a landmark, a foundational text for UK rap. It influenced countless artists, from the conscious hip-hop of the 90s to the grime MCs of the 2000s and beyond. The album's themes of identity, struggle, and social commentary are still just as relevant today. It proved that you could make world-class hip-hop without sacrificing your own culture or your own accent. It was and still is a true masterpiece. True. Being a pioneer is never easy. You're the one breaking new ground, and that means you're the one who has to deal with all the obstacles. For London Posse, the journey was a constant grind. The British music industry at the time didn't really know what to do with them. They were too British for the American hip-hop market, and too street for the mainstream pop charts in the UK. Record labels struggled to market them. They were put in a box that they never asked to be in, facing an industry that wasn't ready for their authentic sound. They also faced challenges on the streets. The name Gangster Chronicle itself caused problems. The police and the media were quick to label them and their music, without understanding the social commentary they were providing. They weren't glorifying a gangster lifestyle. They were chronicling the world around them, reporting from the front line of urban Britain. But this nuance was often lost. Their shows were sometimes shut down by the authorities, and they were viewed with suspicion simply because of the power and honesty of their message. It was a constant battle to be heard and understood correctly. The financial struggle was real too. This was before UK rap was a multi-million-pound industry. They were touring in a van, playing small clubs, and often not getting the financial rewards their influence deserved. They were building a scene from the ground up, but the architects don't always get to live in the penthouse. They did it for the love of the music and the culture, but the pressure of trying to make a living from their art was immense. This grind, this constant struggle takes a toll on any group, no matter how talented or passionate they are. Despite these hurdles, their determination never wavered. They overcame the challenges by staying true to themselves and their community. Their support came from the streets, from the kids who bought their records and came to their shows. They built a loyal fan base that understood what they were about. They proved their critics wrong by delivering powerful live performances and creating a classic album that has stood the test of time. Their struggle was part of their story, and it made their achievements even more significant. They fought for their place, and in doing so, they paved the way for others. Even the brightest flames can't burn forever. After the incredible high of Gangster Chronicle and the years of touring that followed, things started to change for London Posse. The pressures that had been building up began to take their toll. The constant grind of the music industry, the creative differences that naturally arise between talented individuals, and the simple reality of growing up and wanting different things all played a part. By the mid-1990s, the original energy that had brought them together started to fade. The journey as a collective was coming to an end. The split wasn't a big dramatic explosion, it was more of a gradual parting of ways. The members began to drift in different directions, exploring their own interests and creative paths. Rodney P. was developing as a solo artist, honing the thoughtful, conscious style that would define his later career. Bionic was also looking to forge his own path. The tight-knit unit that had taken on the world was slowly dissolving. It's a story that has happened to many great groups. The same intense energy that creates the magic can also be what pulls it apart. There was no official breakup announcement, no farewell tour. They just stopped making music together. For the fans, it was a sad moment. London Posse had been such a powerful force, a symbol of unity and strength for the UK scene. Their absence left a huge void. The scene they had helped to build was now missing its founding fathers. The music industry had moved on, and new sounds and new artists were starting to emerge. But the question always remained, what if they had stayed together? What other classics could they have given us? Looking back, the split was perhaps inevitable. They had achieved so much in a short space of a few years. They had released a classic album, changed the sound of British music, and inspired a generation. They had kicked down the door and left it wide open for others to walk through. Their work as a collective was done. It was time for a new chapter, for the individual members to continue their journeys separately. The end of the group was not the end of their story, but rather the beginning of new ones. The end of London Posse was not the end of the music. The members took the spirit of the group and carried it into their own solo careers, each making their own unique mark on the culture. Rodney P. in particular became an icon in his own right. He truly earned his title as the Rhythm Killer and the godfather of British hip-hop. He signed with True Thoughts, a respected independent label, and released his solo album, The Future. It was a mature, thoughtful record that continued the social commentary of his Posse days, but with a new level of wisdom and experience. He didn't just stay in the studio. Rodney P. became a hugely respected voice and a cultural ambassador. He hosted a groundbreaking BBC documentary series, The Hip Hop World News, which explored the social and political power of hip-hop across the globe. He became a regular voice on radio, hosting shows for BBC One Extra, and connecting with a new generation of fans. He never stopped performing, his live shows still legendary for their energy and lyrical skill. He became an elder statesman of the scene, always showing love to the new artists coming up, a bridge between the old school and the new. Bionic also continued his journey in music. He went on to work with the group The Aspects, continuing to push his lyrical abilities. Though he didn't maintain the same high public profile as Rodney P., his contribution was still felt within the scene. His sharp, energetic style had left a permanent mark, and his verses with London Posse are still studied and respected by MCs today. He remained a legendary figure, a reminder of that raw, untamed energy that first put UK hip-hop on the map. His legacy is cemented in those classic tracks. DJ Business and Cypho also remained involved in the culture they helped to build. Business continued to DJ and produce, lending his skills to various projects and always staying connected to the roots of the music. Cypho the Human Beatbox, a true innovator, inspired a whole new generation of beatboxers in the UK and beyond. The paths they took were different, but the impact of their collective work as London Posse never faded. They had created the spark, and now they were watching the fire they started spread in countless new and exciting directions. Their individual journeys were a continuation of the Posse's mission. So, what is the legacy of London Posse? It's simple. They are the architects. They drew the blueprint for modern UK rap music. Before them, the idea of a British rapper being taken seriously on a global stage felt like a distant dream. They turned that dream into a reality. They did this by being unapologetically themselves. They fused the sounds of their parents' homeland, Jamaica, with the sounds of their own home, London. They created a hybrid sound that was entirely new, entirely authentic, and entirely British. This act of musical self-definition was their greatest gift to the culture. Their influence can be heard everywhere. Every time a UK artist uses London slang or patois in their rhymes, they are walking on the path that London Posse cleared. From the conscious lyricism of artists like Kalashnikov and Skinnyman, to the commercial success of grime legends like Dizzy Rascal and Kano, the DNA of London Posse is present. They proved that your own accent, your own story, was your greatest strength. They gave a generation of artists permission to be themselves, and in doing so, they unlocked the potential of an entire nation's music scene. Their classic album, Gangster Chronicle, remains a vital document. It's more than just an old-school record, it's a history lesson. It captures a specific moment in time in British social history, but its themes of identity, inequality, and resilience are timeless. For any young person wanting to understand the roots of UK rap, Gangster Chronicle is required listening. It's the foundation stone upon which so much has been built. It's a reminder that great art often comes from the margins, from the voices that refuse to be silenced. Ultimately, London Posse's music still matters today because it was built on truth. It was real. It was the sound of a community finding its voice and speaking its truth to power. They weren't just making songs, they were building a culture. They were telling the world that they were here, that their stories were important, and that their sound was the future. They were right. The thriving, diverse, and globally respected UK music scene of 2025 stands as a testament to their vision, their courage, and their incredible talent. They didn't just make music, they made history.